Welcome back to the I'm Book podcast. I'm April O'Leary, and I'm here today with Michelle Glogovac, who is a podcast booking expert. And we have so much to talk about today. She's also an author and runs a podcast matchmaking company. So I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for taking the time to stop by our show today.
Well, thank you for having me, April. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
So, we work with new authors, debut authors. Most of them are established or expert in some other area. They have a business that's successful or transformational experience that's happened to them that's really impactful to a certain audience of people. For example, we had mother and daughter co-authors who wrote about recovering from a TBI. Another mother who wrote a book about the fatal and accidental potential overdose from using opioids. And she's on a mission now to bring that awareness to kids. And then we have lots of other authors who have all other kinds of topics. But podcasting is a great way to get the message out about your book and who you are and what you're passionate about in the world. But most authors don't know where to start, don't know how to even consider booking themselves on podcasts. So, what would you say, how did you get involved in this field of podcasting from the beginning? And how did you merge yourself into helping others?
It was a total fluke, I'll be honest with you. I spent 18 years in corporate aviation selling jet fuel. And that
Wow.
was a fluke in itself. I was a law major, my undergrad, but I needed a job and could walk to the airport. So that
Okay.
is how I landed in aviation, quite literally. And then I just stuck with it and didn't get out until eventually I was laid off. And by then I was married. I had two babies, and they were literally babies. They're a year and 3 weeks apart.
Wow.
And
Irish twins.
they are, yeah. I didn't want to travel anymore. I didn't want to either have a nanny going with us or, pay someone to be here with me while taking care of them. And then doing what I didn't feel like it was making a difference in the world. I wasn't making it a better place for these two tiny humans to grow up in. And
Mm.
so the layoff was like the blessing in disguise of, okay, what can I do? Let me figure out what is it that I love to do? What am I good at? That's also going to bring me, a financial income to contribute to the house as well.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And a friend from my birthing class of my first child said, there is a new podcast that's launching. There's a life and business coach. I think you might want to listen. And I went, how do you listen? I know what a podcast is, but I have no idea how to
What
listen
year,
to
what
one.
year was this?
2018.
2018. Okay. How do you
Yes.
listen to a podcast?
And of course, I had an iPhone, so that's what that purple button was for. So I started listening, and she was talking about everybody has a purpose and a passion, and you just have to go on this journey to figure it out. And I was like, yeah, that's where I am. And so I started posting about listening to her show, and this is what I'm trying to do, and I don't know what that means. And she reached out to me and said, do you want to pitch me to be on other shows? Because obviously my content is resonating with you and you get it. And I was like, yeah, that's a thing. Yes, yes, I will do that. But then I dove in and learned everything about podcasting, how to produce a show, how to find guests, how to repurpose your content. And so I figured out how to do all of that, but I fell in love with the pitching part because it allows us to share stories. It allows listeners to know that someone else has been in their shoes. Someone else has walked that path before, and now you have hope. You also have a roadmap of what worked for them, no matter what it is. If we're talking about trauma or grief or how to build a business or how to write a book and get it published, there is a podcast on all of that. On top of, you want to be entertained with comedy or true crime, there is something for everyone, and it's accessible by everyone. Even more so, besides the free part, now we have transcripts that Apple's offering, hosts should be too, but we're making it more accessible, whether it's listening to a show, reading the show, any kind of thing like that, while also building the brand of the person who's the guest, just by sharing their story, not by selling their product, service, or book, but by really sharing of themselves and going into it to teach and inspire and educate the listener.
That's beautiful, beautifully said. And
Thank you.
I love it as fellow entrepreneurs. I have a similar story of sort of tripping into the publishing business and sort of learning, trial by fire. And it's interesting that you say that. Similarly, in 2010, I got a life coaching certification. So tiny bit of a backstory here, but the guy that I got the certification from, David Essel, had an XM radio show at the time. So that was before podcasting, I believe. When did podcasting actually start? Do
Actually, it
you
was
know?
like 2004. It was even earlier.
2004?
Yeah, it's been around for over 20 years.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay. Well, so he was, come to think of it. So he was doing it live on XM. And then I think they had a producer that would put it into a podcast. But I think at the time I ignored it because I was like, I don't even know what that really is.
Right.
But
Nobody
I was
really did
supposed to get
until
the guests for his show. And it was sort of
2018
like
or so.
what was that?
Nobody really knew about him until like 2018 or so. And then COVID hit and everyone had one.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so great that there's so many topics and so much information you can consume right through your phone. And my oldest daughter is a true crime addict. Like she loves true crime podcasts, and everyone kind of finds their groove.
Hmm.
So you started booking for this life coach or consultant.
Right. Hmm.
She hired you to do
Hmm.
that.
Yes.
And tell me about that experience for you. Were you successful? Obviously, you were because you're still doing it now. But what were some of the things that you learned that you didn't know initially?
What I learned most was I was looking at what others were doing. And so I would look at what they were doing and trying to figure out how can I do it better. And she actually paid for me to take a course on pitching, and looking back on it, it was bad.
Okay.
There was no personalization to the pitches. It wasn't the same. So I've perfected my own type of formula and method that we listen to every podcast before we pitch to it. Every
Mhm,
single pitch is going to be personal. We
mhm,
create the media kits. I create every speaking topic that goes out so that nothing is generic. You will not speak on, I'm in the publishing industry. Okay, so is the person next door. What is it that makes you special and unique? And how do we shape that into a topic that sounds interesting?
mm. So
I've taken that on as, and this is, really what I want to do. And I want it to be special and for people to get to know each other. But then also, how do you repurpose all of those interviews as a way of saying thank you to the host, but also as a way to create marketing content for yourself?
mhm,
So that was a missing piece that I definitely saw other agencies were not doing. So we create Spotify playlists, we create social media branded graphics, we download the transcripts and send you the quotes. We even create the quote graphics for you. And then I give guides of, go on Twitter, go on Pinterest, go on all these places, create your own blog post, embed your player on there, and teaching the clients how to do that so that it's not simply, yeah, we pitched you, go show up to the interview and that's it.
mm. It's beautiful. It's a more holistic approach in using your time in a meaningful way and also supporting the person who's inviting you onto the show. And I can say, as a podcast host and someone who was guest producing a show back 15 years ago, it's such an interesting, I don't want to say phenomenon isn't probably the right word, but when you have guests, some of them will do a great job sharing their interview, and some you never hear from them again. You send them the recording, the video on YouTube, sample graphics or whatever, and it's like they're on to the next thing. And so really you're looking at it as a partnership.
Yeah. And those people who don't share are also the ones who go, well, what's my ROI? Well, did you do anything other than show up for the interview? Because if you're not sharing it, how are people going to know where you are? And,
Right.
using the excuse of, oh, well, I don't want to self promote. It's not self promotion. You're sharing what knowledge you have and how people can get to know you better and listen to that knowledge while also thanking the person that took the time to interview you, paid for the production of that interview, and are also sharing it. So, there's really no excuse in my book, and it angers me when people just don't share.
So you talked about it being customizable and that you want to really listen to the show in advance and then customize something that's specific for that show. Would you say that you do that with each person that you're booking, that you're pitching custom pitches to each different show?
Mhm.
Or are you really narrowing it down to here's your expertise and what makes you different? And so the same sort of topics go out to all of the various shows.
We
What's your
have a
strategy?
we have a set number of topics, and the minimum is 6, and those
Mhm.
all are included in the media kit that gets attached. But we pull the specific topics that we think are most applicable to that show.
Mm.
And those are the ones that get included into the pitch. And we say attached is the media kit, with further topics if you want to look at those. But this is what we think is the best fit. This is what you have not covered, and this is why. And so every pitch directly goes to the host of, we've listened to your show. This is one of the episodes that really stood out to us, and it's never the most recent. Don't be
Mhm.
lazy. Scroll through and actually listen to something that you're going to resonate with and tell them why. And the only copy and paste part is the 2 or 3 sentence bio of the client, because that's not gonna change. That then
Right.
gets plugged in with their topics they're constantly getting changed, and then including, where have they been featured, link to their Spotify playlist. Everything is hyperlinked so that the host doesn't have to do homework, and
Mm.
that's so important, to make sure that you do. You give them homework, to me, that's an automatic no. If I have to go Google your name because you didn't include something versus I want to Google you more to find out, but you did include everything, then that's different. But if I
Mm.
have to leave the email to go figure out who you are and what you do, then it's a no.
I love that. That's some good insider advice. So you work with authors, I assume, and other
Yes.
kinds of consultants. So what are some of the strategies you would say are good for first-time authors who may be trying to do this themselves before maybe hiring someone? Or would you say, you know what, it's just so much to learn. It's better to hire someone. So, as an independent publishing company, there are certainly people who want to self-publish their first book. They don't want
Mhm.
to pay for somebody to do it. And then there are other people who are like, there's just way too much to learn to do all that. So I'd rather pay somebody. So I know that probably there are listeners on both sides of that fence
Right.
here. So it would be good to kind of include both strategies because I think that there are some things that people can do on their own. But of course, to really have success, it's good to have partnership.
Definitely. I think one of the benefits in working with an agency like myself is that we already have warm contacts. We already have a Rolodex. So our research, although we research every single day, and when I say we, I do have a teammate. It's not just me, and I'm calling myself we. We research every day new podcasts, but we have a Rolodex of ones that trust us that say, you know what, if you have a client and you feel it's a fit, then we know we're going to feel it's a fit. So just send them the booking link or tell us that, this is your newest client. So that's one of the benefits of us doing it for you. I literally wrote my book so that everybody who can't afford it or doesn't want to pay for an agency can do it themselves. So yes, it takes time and it takes money to research it, to figure out what your topics are. And I think that's one of the hardest parts is figuring out what you want to speak on, because you have to get outside of your own head. Even for myself, I can do it for you, no problem. And then when I think back to myself and go, oh, what can I talk about? What makes me interesting? What have I
Mm,
done? It becomes harder. So I know, because that was the hardest chapter for me to write too, of how do I pull these topics out of someone, because I just
mm,
do it. But I ask a lot of questions within the book that you can ask yourself, and to take time and think about it in different categories of, what's your business journey? What's your personal journey? And how do these questions relate to these categories? And then how do you craft them into topics? So I think that's one of the hardest parts. And the time that it takes, time is money, right? We
yeah,
all
for
know that.
sure.
Yeah, but researching, what it is, and then remembering that you don't just pitch your book, because a host is not going to interview the book. They're interviewing you.
Right.
So make the topics about you, not just about your book. You can certainly have a topic that is the title of your book, and then add the subtitle or, something else that explains what it is. And that's especially true for fiction authors of, how are you going to talk about these characters? Like, you're going to give the spoilers away, but what about
Right.
you is in the book? What was your writing ritual? What did that look like? What was your publishing journey like? There's all kinds of topics that you can pull that relate to your book. And the one thing that I always say to remember is at the end of every single interview, you're going to be asked, where can people find you? And
Right,
then
right,
you can plug
exactly.
yourself and your book and share about it. so that the interview doesn't have to be about the book. It's about you and finding that audience who's going to read your book. So now find those podcasts that have those listeners that are your ideal readers. And what do they want to learn? Are they mothers in their 40s who are going through what we go through in our 40s? And how can you talk to them and then pique their interest of, this is what I've been through. And oh, by the way, I wrote a book because I was in the middle of this part of life, and out came a book.
Right.
And getting to that so that it becomes personal, while not simply being about the book, but about you, because we all want to know the author that's behind these beautiful words that we're reading and falling in love with. And we don't get to recognize you on the street. You're not on TV, you're not at the Academy Awards, so we're recognizing you. So let us get to know you, the author, because we cherish what you're putting out into the world.
Yes. And it's funny because you're right. At the end of every podcast interview, I always say, where can people find you? What's the best way to get in touch with you? Blah, blah, blah. Right.
Right.
And as a
Hmm.
publisher, for us, we really coach our authors. The book is the start of their journey with you. So the
Right.
book is opening doors for podcasts. It legitimizes who you are and what you're doing. And when you pitched to be on our show, of course, I checked out your website and checked out what you do. And then because you have a book, which I do want to talk about here, um, it's called How to Get on Podcasts, Cultivate Your Following, Strengthen Your Message, and Grow as a Thought Leader Through Podcast Guesting, which is a beautiful title because it tells the reader specifically what you do. And
Right.
it helps someone who is looking, like if I'm on Amazon and I'm Googling how to get on podcasts, that's
It comes
exactly
up.
what your book is called, right? It's
Yes.
like, that's what I'm wondering. How do I get on podcasts? Oh, well, here's a book. And it just came out this year, January 19th of 2024. So congratulations
Thank
is in order
you.
for you for that. So how has the book impacted your business and what you're doing? I'm curious.
It's been a mix. I've had people say, I read the book and now I want to hire you
Okay.
because they realize how much work goes into
Right.
it.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot of podcast interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I did my own podcast book tour, which is what I do for authors of, let's promote the podcast. And
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, I think it's been over 30, it's been way over 30 since December. So, getting myself out there, I got to do a live TV interview here in the Bay Area,
Wow,
which
that's
was very
great.
cool. Yes. So it's really been helping other people. And that's been the great part of seeing. I just interviewed actually a children's author who's been following me, and he got the book. I was his first pitch. And he wanted to show me that he knew exactly what to do after reading the book. And it was beautiful because he literally followed the exact formula that I laid out and got it right. And to me, that means that the book has done something. We don't have standards in podcasting. You know this. I'm sure you get all
Right.
kinds of
Mm-hmm.
pitches. And I want there to be a standard. I want copy and paste to no longer be acceptable. I want personalization to be the way it's the gold standard that everybody should be achieving towards and doing if they want to be a podcast guest. Because
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, we're continuing to grow. It's been around 20 years, but it's still treated as, this is the hobby. And yeah, for many, it is a hobby. This is a side thing. It's a passion project, but it needs to be treated as something that is professional. You show up properly and you have your microphone set up and you're going to talk and you don't have your phone dinging, because if you're going on live TV, you're certainly not doing that. So
Right.
podcast shouldn't be any different. And
Mm-hmm.
you have that opportunity to reach the masses in a podcast. And there's no reason why we shouldn't treat it as such a professional platform. And that's really what I think the book has done and shown people that this is how you do it the right way if you want to be on podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think it's important to know that in the world of copy paste, I mean, how many times do I get LinkedIn messages, for example,
Uh,
that I clearly know were, the only part that was different is they inserted O'Leary Publishing into one little section of it. And I just ignore it. I don't even respond most
yeah.
of the time. And it feels almost like a waste of time for everybody. Like, why are you wasting my time with this depersonalized? You didn't take any time to even go to my website or see, or the thing, I see your digital footprint, like
Right.
that term. It's like, ay, ay, ay.
Or they use
So
AI.
yeah, it's really, but I think that in this world of AI and copy paste and really easy, cheap communication, what can set you apart is the fact that you took the time to
Hmm.
do a little research and send something personal that will speak volumes. And so you mentioned book tours, and I wanted to get to that also because I think it's a really important strategy for authors to be able to reach a new audience and to get the word out about their book. And of course, as you said, not just, hey, look at me, I wrote a book, promote my book for me, but how do I create meaningful conversations and find new people to engage with when I'm brand new? I don't necessarily have any credentials. Do you find that working with new authors is a little more difficult because they don't have already a following, or are there strategies that you find are not too hard because podcasters are looking for guests? What's been your experience?
My experience has been you don't have to have a huge following. You don't even have to have a podcast interview under your belt. As long as you have something to say that is interesting, inspirational, educational, and you craft it in that way, that's all you need. And I am sure that at this day and age, you have some form of you speaking on the internet, whether it's an interview, an Instagram live, you're on YouTube, there is something that your first pitches you can link to show that you can speak intelligently, that you can hold a conversation, that you know what you're talking about. And so you can link to those in the beginning until you get those first few podcasts. And that's not a big deal. If you don't have a huge following, that's okay too. Are you showing that you're going to share whatever it is that you end up on? That's more key and relevant than I only have 250 followers, yeah, but that could be 250 more podcast listeners than this show already has. So as
Right.
long as you show that you're going to share it, that's all that's necessary. As long as your topics are good, you are genuine, then I don't think there is any issue in not having interviews already done, that kind of a thing. And you can always record a video of yourself as well if that helps to just introduce yourself and go that extra mile, because that is what makes us all stand apart, is by
Hmm.
showing that we're here, we're showing up, we're going to do the work because we want this so badly.
Mm,
And, for new authors, you have to build your platform no matter what before you put out your book, once the book is out. And so a podcast book tour allows readers to get to know you. It allows you to get those pre-orders. It allows you also in the sense of saving time and money by not going on an in-person book tour.
right.
Uh, it costs money to fly, to go meet people in places, and you don't know how many are going to show up. Whereas you can stay at home, you can be in your pajama bottoms, but be, professional on top if you want, and show up for 35 minutes to an hour, and you could be reaching thousands of people, and then you
Mm,
share it and the host shares it, and it becomes this ripple effect that more and more people get to know you, versus if you went and you flew to Los Angeles and you knew no one to invite, and then you end up there and 5 people show up. That was a lot of time and money you just spent for 5 people versus getting on a podcast and reaching hundreds and thousands of your ideal readers.
yeah. Not to mention as well that that's evergreen content is
Yes.
I'm sure you know that term, but I'll tell the listeners in case you don't know that evergreen content is content that it doesn't go out of style. It doesn't lose its leaves. So once a podcast has been recorded, someone could discover it a year from now or 2 years from now, and it's still going to be working for you
Mhm.
even though you recorded that, eons ago. So I think that's part of the beauty of it as well. Not that I don't love in-person events. We do love to do book signings when possible and speaker events because there is the magic of people being in the same room. But
Right.
once that event is over, if you haven't video recorded it, it's over. Which, as a side tip, if you are doing live events, try to record them and try to use them as a purpose to also having photos and all kinds of stuff that once the event is over, you have something. So just a little side tip there. So What's the best way for authors who are now like, oh my God, I need to be on podcast. I need to connect with this woman. I need her to do the legwork and show me what to do. Like, I don't want to be creating my own media kit. I don't know how to do that. I'm not sure where to start. What is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
You can go to my website, themlgcollective.com, and it has all of my services there. You can go to my personal website as well, michelleglogovac.com. You can also buy the book, How to Get on Podcasts. And my podcast is My Simplified Life, where I do interviews, but I also share a lot of tips and have episodes on podcast book tours and podcast pitching and how to be a great guest. And then I'm on all the social media platforms, so you can find me on any of them.
That's so great. Well, I love what you have to share. I think that being on podcasts, especially like you said, in the age of, I would say, the beginnings, even though we're 20 years into podcasting, there is still so much growth to be had. There's so many people that you can reach. And at this added level, sort of like writing a book adds this added level of credibility to who you are and what you do. I believe podcasting really does the same thing.
Yeah, I definitely
It
agree.
gives you a chance to elevate yourself and share what you know and who you are. And let's say that you're going to go apply for another job. We've had authors that have pivoted in their career because the book opened opportunities. And just like we might Google someone and scout them for whether they're going to be a legitimate podcast, you can guarantee that employers are doing that as well. So if they all of a sudden see you're on a bunch of podcasts and you have a book, that's pretty impressive. That's going to set
Yes.
you apart. So I would say 100%, if you're an author and you're not currently podcasting, it is a ripe opportunity. And if you don't know how to get started, at the very minimum, order Michelle's book, How to Get on Podcasts. Read what she has to share, implement it if you can. And if you don't have the time to do all that, then just hire her to do it for you. So, there's lots of ways to skin the cat. There's lots of ways to get on podcasts, and you don't have to be the expert. Luckily, there are experts to help you. So, I just want to thank you so much for taking your time to be on our show today, for
Thank
offering so much
you.
value for our authors. And I really hope that those authors who are really wanting to get the word out and are passionate about their book and their message, that they're going to take that. This might be the push they need off of the side of the cliff into podcast, um, into the realm of podcasting. And I hope it is. So do you have any final encouragement or tips for maybe someone who's thinking like, yeah, it sounds like a good idea, but
But just do it. You have something that someone needs to hear. You are unique because even if you've been through something that someone else has, you've gotten through it in a special, different way, and the way you tell your story is gonna be different than anyone else. So, get out there, put yourself out there, do the interviews, and share yourself with the rest of us.
I love it. Thank you so much. And I look
Thank
forward to
you.
sharing this podcast with our audience and getting it out there in front of your people as well, and us partnering together to get the word out about who you are and what you do and how you help authors to really get their message out. Because what a beautiful thing. I'm so happy that you stumbled upon that and you took that chance on yourself, and that uh, life coach took the chance on you, and you guys created so much magic together. So congratulations on your book, and thank you for
Thank
being
you.
on the show.
Thank you so much.